Early in the morning, with the day just beginning, you pause for a moment and think to yourself, why am I in such a rush when there's nowhere I really need to go? It's a quiet kind of realization, but a powerful one. Just you and the silence. Now that's silence. It used to scare you, didn't it? We've all been there. After a lifetime of doing, running, helping, working, noise feels like purpose. But what if I told you that the quiet moments, the ones we often avoid, are exactly where your power lives now? There's a popular belief that staying home in your later years is a sign of slowing down, giving up, or becoming irrelevant. Let's challenge that today. Let's rewrite the story. Staying home is not a retreat from the world, it's a return to yourself. It's not escape, it's rebuilding. Rebuilding your body, your mind, your rhythm, your dignity, and most of all, your control. When you stay home, you give yourself the gift of your own time. No appointments you don't want, no social events that drain you, no rushing to please anyone but yourself. You finally have space to breathe. And in that space, something remarkable happens. You begin to notice. You notice how your thoughts wander when there's no TV on. You notice how your body feels when it's not being pushed around by clocks and chores. You notice what brings you peace and what doesn't. And here's the truth that many people don't realize until it's too late. The world outside is often noisy, but not wise. It rewards speed over depth, attention over understanding, noise over wisdom. And as we grow older, we start to see that more clearly. The parties, the drama, the small talk, they lose their shine. What matters is peace. What matters is clarity. What matters is feeling like you are exactly where you're supposed to be. That's why being at home isn't about hiding. It's about building, brick by brick, quietly, without an audience. Because now you're not performing. You're not proving. You're not chasing approval or applause. You've done all that. And it took a toll, didn't it? But now, at this stage, you have something more valuable, the chance to build a life on your terms. And it starts with being alone. Not lonely, but alone. There's a big difference. Being alone is powerful. It's where your real strength lives. When you're alone, no one is shaping your thoughts. No one is pulling your attention in 10 different directions. You're no longer reacting. You're choosing. And the older we get, the more that matters. You start to realize you don't need 50 friends. You need peace. You don't need to be seen. You need to feel seen by yourself. And that's the magic of solitude. It brings you back to who you are without the labels, the roles, the busyness. Let me tell you something that might surprise you. Some of the most powerful people in history, thinkers, leaders, artists, they didn't find their strength in crowds. They found it in silence. One great mind once said that true strategy begins in silence, not in noise, not in war rooms, in quiet, because that's where we see clearly. That's where we sharpen our minds. That's where we plan what truly matters. You see, the person who always has to be seen, always has to be talking, always has to be out in the world, they're not in control. They're being pulled by it. But when you can sit in your own company, comfortable, content, thoughtful, now that's strength, that's control, that's dignity. And something interesting happens when you're not constantly showing up, posting, appearing. People start to wonder about you. They start to talk about you, not because you're loud, but because you're not. And in that space, you create mystery. You create presence without presence. You build an invisible kind of power, the kind that doesn't need to be explained. It's simply felt. Now maybe you're thinking, but I don't want to disappear. And you won't. You're not vanishing. You're choosing your presence with intention. You're learning that the loudest person in the room isn't always the strongest. Sometimes it's the one sitting quietly, observing, understanding, preparing. The home becomes your haven. It's not just four walls and a recliner. It's your fortress. It's the place where you heal your thoughts, align your energy, and get clear on what really matters to you now. This is the stage of life where your soul doesn't want noise. It wants meaning. And staying home gives you the room to find it. You don't need to attend every gathering. You don't need to keep up with every trend. You don't have to say yes to every phone call. Your power now is in choosing peace over pressure, choosing silence over chaos, choosing to spend your energy where it nourishes you, not drains you. And I promise you this, the longer you sit with yourself, the more you'll start to see things others don't. You'll spot the patterns in people's behavior. You'll hear the truth behind what's being said. You'll notice your own instincts getting sharper. That's not magic. That's clarity. And it only comes in silence. And so if you're someone who's been feeling guilty for not being out and about, for saying no to events, for enjoying your own company, let go of that guilt. You've earned your peace. You've walked the long road. Now is the time to rest, reflect, and rebuild. Not for others, but for you. You are not invisible. You are not finished. You are just beginning a new kind of life. One where you are the master of your time, your thoughts, and your space. There's something peaceful about waking up in your own rhythm. Not to an alarm, not to a rush, but to your own breath, steady and calm. For the first time in your life, your time belongs to you. No one is knocking on the door with demands. No one is expecting you to play a role. That kind of freedom, it's rare and it's powerful. People might not understand it. They might ask, why don't you get out more? Don't you get bored? But they don't realize something important. The absence of noise is not boredom. It's clarity. It's power. Because when you step away from the crowd, you start to hear something much more valuable than other people's voices. You start to hear your own, and that voice inside you, it's not weak, it's not tired. It's been waiting for you to slow down enough to hear it. It carries your instincts, your wisdom, your desires. But most of us for decades had to silence that voice just to survive. We had to go to work, raise families, deal with conflict, and do what was expected. We didn't have time to sit with ourselves, but now you do. And that's where the shift happens. Being alone isn't about being forgotten. It's about being found by your truest self, the version of you that isn't shaped by expectation or obligation. It's just you, raw and honest and open. And that's where real power starts. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that listens, the kind that watches, the kind that understands what others miss. That kind of power is built in silence. When you sit quietly in your own space, something strange happens. You stop reacting. You stop explaining yourself. You stop trying to win people over. And in that stillness, you gain something far more valuable than attention. You gain control. Control over your emotions. Control over your image. Control over your time. That's not a small thing. That's everything. You start to notice what truly affects your mood. You begin to feel which thoughts are real and which are just old habits. You get to observe your reactions instead of being ruled by them. That is emotional freedom. And emotional freedom is rare. So many people live on autopilot, jumping from one task to another, one opinion to the next, one argument after another. But not you, not anymore. When you stay home, when you sit with yourself, you start to choose your emotions, not just feel them. That's a superpower most people never discover. You can decide not to get upset over small things. You can breathe instead of reacting. You can pause instead of lashing out. And the best part? No one's watching. There's no performance. Just you and your mind, practicing stillness like an art. And once you master that inner calm, it changes how the world sees you too. You don't have to speak loudly. You don't have to prove anything. People can feel your presence, even in silence. They sense something different about you. Not flashy, not loud, but rooted, solid, unshakable. And that's because you've built something most people haven't. A life on your own terms. You've stopped outsourcing your value. You've stopped needing everyone's approval. And when you do that, your energy becomes magnetic. People are drawn to you, not because you seek their attention, but because you don't. There's a power in not needing to be everywhere. A power in being selective with your time. A power in creating space between you and the noise. And that power, it makes you unpredictable. It makes you respected. Because the person who's always available is often taken for granted. But the one who's rarely seen, they're remembered. They hold a certain mystery, a quiet strength that can't be faked. So if your life is quieter now than it used to be, good. That's a sign you're on the right path. Because in that quiet, you're becoming dangerous in the best way possible. Not because you're out to hurt anyone, but because you're no longer controlled by anyone. You've learned to rule yourself, and that kind of mastery changes everything. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to explain your choices to anyone. You don't need to fill your days with busyness just to feel important. You are important because you've done the work most people avoid. The work of sitting still. The work of facing your own thoughts. The work of letting go of what no longer serves you. And now, your silence speaks volumes. Your presence carries weight. Your time becomes sacred, not because others say so, but because you finally believe it. So keep going. Keep sitting with yourself. Keep protecting your peace like it's treasure. Because it is. The outside world will always try to pull you back into its chaos. But you know better now. You know that real power doesn't live in crowds. It lives in quiet places. It lives in solitude. It lives right there with you, at home, in silence. There's something sacred about the quiet, not just any silence. The kind that only comes when you've made peace with yourself. No need to explain, no need to impress, no need to rush. Just the rhythm of your breath and the deep knowing that you're right where you belong. Some people mistake quiet for emptiness. They think if your life isn't filled with noise, it must be lacking something. But that's not true, is it? You've been in noisy rooms and felt completely alone. And you've been alone in your kitchen making tea and felt more at peace than you ever did in a crowded hall. That's because power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. Real strength moves quietly. It sits still while everyone else scrambles. It waits, it watches, it understands. And that kind of power is only born in quiet places. Think back to when you were younger. Everything felt urgent. You had to get things done, be everywhere, please everyone. You didn't have time to think, to process, to just be. But now you do. And that's a gift most people don't recognize until it's gone. You've entered the part of life where you're not here to chase, but to command. Not with noise, but with presence. Not by forcing, but by mastering. And mastery only happens when we remove the distractions and go inward. It's in the silence that you notice the truth. About people, about yourself, about the way the world works. You start to see who adds to your peace and who drains it. You start to feel when something is genuine and when it's just noise dressed as importance. Most people are too busy to notice. They stay on the surface, bouncing from one thing to the next. But you've gone deeper. You've taken the time to sit still, to observe, to learn. And in doing that, you've tapped into something very few people ever touch. Authority over yourself. You don't need permission to rest. You don't need approval to say no. You've earned the right to protect your energy, to choose who enters your life and who stays outside. That's power. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a calm, steady, unstoppable way. People feel it even if they don't understand it. They'll say things like, "You seem different," or "You're so calm." What they're really noticing is that you've stopped leaking your energy. You've closed the doors that needed to be closed. And now you're holding it all inside, like a flame that no wind can blow out. That's the kind of power that doesn't fade with age, it grows. Because it's not based on your physical strength or how busy you are. It's based on how deeply rooted you've become in yourself. And here's something most people overlook. You don't build that kind of inner strength in a crowd. You build it in the quiet. In the mornings when no one's calling. In the evenings when you choose a book over a screen. In the moments when you stop trying to be seen and start seeing yourself. The world teaches us to stay visible, to be active, loud, present at all times. But visibility is not the same as power. In fact, the most powerful people are often the least visible. They speak only when it matters. They move only when it's wise. And because of that, every action they take has weight. You now have that same ability. You don't need to be everywhere to make an impact. You don't need to explain yourself to be understood. Your strength now lies in your ability to choose wisely and act purposefully. When you stay home, when you embrace the quiet, you're not falling behind, you're pulling ahead in a different way. While others are scattered, you're centered. While others chase validation, you stand firm in your truth. While others are exhausted from running, you are rested, clear, and steady. That's the difference, and between living for the world and living for yourself. And it's a lesson most people don't learn until they've been worn down by everything they once thought mattered. You, on the other hand, have begun to see it. Maybe not all at once, maybe not perfectly. But the shift is there. You're no longer afraid of your own company. You're no longer ashamed of slowing down. You're no longer seeking permission to live at your own pace. And that's the beginning of real peace, real power, real freedom. So when someone asks you why you stay home more now, why you enjoy your solitude, why you've stepped back from the noise, smile. Because you know what they don't. That behind those quiet walls, you're not shrinking. You're expanding, not fading, but focusing. You're not less than you were. You're more. Just not in the way the world measures it. You've built something invisible, but unshakable. Something quiet but commanding. Something soft but unbreakable. And if there's one thing worth remembering, it's this. The strongest trees grow in silence. The deepest rivers run without sound. And the wisest people speak less, but say more. You are not behind. You are not disappearing. You are becoming, and every quiet hour you spend at home is another step toward the kind of life that doesn't need noise to be meaningful. You're doing more than staying home. You're mastering yourself. There's a quiet kind of wisdom that only comes with time. And if you're listening to this now, it means you've lived long enough to know something that can't be taught in books or classrooms. You've learned that the world outside doesn't always have the answers. Sometimes the answers are waiting right where you are, within the four walls of your home and the four chambers of your heart. People chase the world for decades. They go looking for meaning in relationships, jobs, vacations, possessions. But often the most profound discoveries are made not by going anywhere, but by sitting still. Stillness is where truth rises, and truth has nothing to prove. When you're young, life teaches you to run. When you're older, it teaches you to rest. But rest isn't quitting. It's recovering, rebuilding, reclaiming your strength so you can live with intention, not exhaustion. That's why home becomes more than a place. It becomes your temple. It becomes the one place where you don't have to wear a mask, where you can breathe without judgment, and where every moment is yours to shape. It's where the noise fades and your intuition finally gets the floor. And maybe the biggest shift of all is this. You stop apologizing for choosing peace. You stop explaining. why you'd rather spend time alone than go to a dinner party that drains you. You stop second-guessing your decisions, just because they're different from others your age. You stop chasing energy that doesn't respect yours, because you've done enough chasing in this life. Now is the time to gather strength, to gather clarity, to gather the pieces of yourself you gave away for so long in service to others, and now you get to return to yourself, not with regret, but with reverence. You've earned the right to choose how you live, and with whom, and on what terms. You are no longer here to convince anyone of your worth. You've already proven it by surviving, by showing up, by staying standing when others would have crumbled. You've seen heartbreak, disappointment, maybe even betrayal, and still, you're here, still thoughtful, still growing, still becoming. That in itself is power. And you don't need to travel far to claim it. It's already inside you, waiting, listening, building quietly in the moments when you finally stop trying to be everywhere and start being fully present right where you are. So if your days have slowed, if your circle has gotten smaller, if the world has gone quiet around you, don't mourn it, honor it. That silence isn't emptiness, it's clarity. That solitude isn't loneliness, it's strength. The people who change the world don't always live loudly. Sometimes they live deeply. And depth can't be found in the spotlight. It's found in silence, in stillness, in the quiet decision to live deliberately. And now, it's your time to live that way. Not because the world expects it, but because your soul is ready. If your mornings are simple, let them be sacred. If your phone doesn't ring often, let that be a blessing. If your days feel slower, trust that they're opening space for something deeper. Reflection, freedom, renewal. Because what matters most now is not how much you do, but how much of it is truly yours. You are no less vibrant, no less powerful. You are simply tuning into a new frequency. One the younger version of you didn't know existed. And if you ever doubt that, just remember, true power doesn't knock loudly. It moves quietly, confidently, like a soft breeze that still bends the tallest trees, like a gentle presence that commands attention without saying a word. That's who you are now, a steady hand in a world of rushing hearts, a quiet fire in a world of loud sparks. You don't need to shine like you used to, because now you glow. So go ahead, stay home. Let the world move fast without you. Let the noise pass by, because what you're building in this silence is something no one can take from you. Peace, power, and the priceless joy of being fully, beautifully, unapologetically yourself. And if you've made it this far, I want to thank you for listening, for sharing this space with me, and for honoring the part of your life that deserves to be slow, wise, and full of meaning. If you found value in this message, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your story. What has staying home taught you? How has solitude shaped your strength? And if this video spoke to your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to Strong Elderly Life. There's a whole community here of strong, smart, grounded people like you who know that life doesn't end at 60, 70, or even 80. In many ways, it begins. Here's to living your best life at any age, calm, quiet, and more powerful than ever.